For Creamer Media's Polity, I'm Shannon de Rehove. Professor Raymond Suttner joins me to discuss current politics and the road to Mangaung. Welcome, Professor.
Hi.
Now, firstly, South African politics for the past year has mainly focused on the leadership race at Mangaung. However, you note that there is little to suggest that the leadership choices relate to political programs or ideas. Can you suggest why this might be so?
Yes, at the risk of sounding like a university professor, I will give you the background to why I understand this to be a conference without politics. In most democratic developments in recent times, one's seen a situation where a popular movement has been involved in a struggle to create democracy. Once democracy is created, there tends to be a centralization in the cabinet, the presidency, and the ordinary members tend to have little involvement in policy making. This is also true, incidentally, for many Western democracies, like Blair declared war on Iraq without the Labour caucus knowing it. Now, in South Africa, we had a tradition in the 1980s of massive popular involvement. From 1990 onwards, it was a leadership-driven process, despite the RDP allegedly being people-driven. So the process of depoliticization started before the Zuma era, or let's say the lack of popular involvement started before then. But during the Thabo Mbeki period particularly, there was a lot of dispute over gear and other programs. There was some ideological factors that distinguished one type of leader from another, or one type of inclination from another. Now, with the rise of President Zuma, the Polokwane Conference, allegedly a project for the poor, allegedly a project to return the ANC to the people, in fact, you had a flourishing of patronage and corruption, so that politics, although there had been patronage before, but politics has now primarily become not about politics, but about the fortunes of people. Fortunes meaning good luck in getting a job, and fortunes in the sense of diverting state resources to private wealth, as we are seeing in Kandla, and in the fortunes of a range of relatives of the president and others.
You state that in the run-up to Mangaung suggests that the conference won't lead to stability in South Africa, with a fixation with personalities and fortunes of individuals rather being an ongoing feature of politics. What does this mean for the country?
You see, stability is a broader question. I think that the state doesn't have enough resources to provide a better life for all. So it needs investment, it needs companies that it can tax, and it needs these companies to have confidence in the stability of the economy and the social and political order. And I think the atmosphere of lawlessness, which has been present for some years, for example, indiscriminate use of force, political assassinations, evasion of corruption charges on the part of the president, and things like this create an atmosphere of instability. I mean, we're onto our third police commissioner in I don't know how many years, and she's not faring very well. We have got the director of public prosecutions dismissed because he was not fit for office. One asks, why was he appointed in the first place? You have a range of people who are appointed for reasons that are, or continue to hold office despite legal charges being leveled against them. I mean, no one will know, unless the DA's legal action succeeds, no one will know whether President Zuma was guilty or innocent of the hundreds of charges he had against him.
Now, apartheid was defeated in 1994, yet you argue that many of the trajectories of black South Africans remain very similar to that of the past. Please elaborate on that statement.
You know, I borrowed something here from Angela Davis, the African-American activist, who argues that slavery continues in many ways because black people in America are overrepresented in the prisons in America. Now, I started to think about South Africa, and when we talked about the characteristics of apartheid, we said that white South Africans enjoyed the sort of democracy and benefits of a welfare state and a parliamentary democracy. But under apartheid, black people suffered inferior education, lack of basic health care, access to water, etc., etc. Now, what you're seeing in post-apartheid South Africa is initially there were massive improvements in people's conditions in some areas. You know, the electrical wires used to go from one white town to the next, and people in these rural areas would see the wires, but they didn't get electricity. Now, there were these improvements, but urbanization since late apartheid period has not been met with adequate provision of infrastructure and facilities. And people are unhappy about this. People are living in conditions that are not fit for human beings. And when they destroy structures, the reaction of government officials is to say nothing can excuse the destruction of public property. Now, for people to direct their energies in an organized political way with discipline and so forth requires that there be a community. In the 1980s, you could have popular power because despite apartheid, people were sufficient, they bonded, they lived in community situations. Now, in places like Brom, Fisherville, these other informal settlements, people have very dehumanized conditions, and it's very hard for them to have a community. So what I'm saying then is, and also with violence and criminality, when one hears people talking against the war against crime, they're not talking about you and I. They're actually, the person who will land in jail is going to be predominantly a black person, and predominantly an African, because the people who are in those so-called service delivery protests, people who get shot, the people who get picked up as loiterers or hawkers who are not allowed to hawk there, people who are involved in these protests in the Western Cape are the poorest of the poor. And their destiny has not changed so much. They may have the vote, but they get 69 rands a day, in the Western Cape. I mean, how can you prescribe that as a living wage under an ANC-led government?
Now, moving on to Marikana, you have expressed concern that the ANC has not shown more commiseration with the families of those that died, and that ANC leaders are more concerned about political rivals to the NUM. Do you think that the ANC and its alliance partners should have responded differently or better to Marikana?
Well, from what I've said already, I shouldn't have been surprised. But I was shocked because here was a post-liberation police force firing in rapid fire. And you didn't get a sense of shock on the part of the government. You found all these articles about people carrying pangas and being treated by a sangoma, and what happened before then. And I felt, and there was also things about Lonman and global capitalism, but here were people who were shot in cold blood. Now that shocked me that they didn't have the capacity to be shocked by that anymore. Also, this thing of using medicine and being possessed, it is interesting if you look at history. In 1921, there was a massacre at Bullhoek near Queenstown, where General Smuts ordered the shooting, and they also said these people were possessed. So the language is the language that one has. I mean, if people are allegedly possessed, does that make them more dangerous?
You suggest that the ANC faces a deep ethical crisis. How do you think that South Africa's ruling party can possibly emerge from this malaise?
See, I'm not sure that I don't think the present leadership is so tainted by irregularities of a range of types that I'm not sure that it can lead itself in South Africa out of this. I'm not saying that a change of leadership would have no effect. It's possible that a change to a leader who has got more gravitas and sort of a regularized way of handling the leadership could possibly lead towards a more ethically based government. But I think it may well be that one needs to think about a broad alliance of people who believe in the values of the Constitution, not anti-ANC, but including ANC people and many others who would like to see the constitutional values sustained and developed and flourishing.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That was Professor Raymond Suttner speaking about South Africa's current political situation.